Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. Summary and analysis by Brevreds. Introduction. Negotiation isn't just for boardrooms or high-stakes business deals. It's a skill you need in every aspect of life, whether you're trying to negotiate a raise, get a better price on a car, or even get your kids to clean their rooms. Never Split the Difference, Negotiating as if your life depended on it by Chris Voss is a guide on how to negotiate like a pro, based on Voss's years of experience as an FBI hostage negotiator. Voss's key insight is simple. Forget about splitting the difference, and always aim for the best possible outcome. The negotiation techniques in this book aren't based on compromise or being nice, but on understanding human psychology and using it to your advantage. Every interaction becomes a chance to guide the conversation and secure what you want, while still making the other person feel heard and understood. Let's dive in and explore these powerful negotiation tactics, using some fascinating real-life stories to make these lessons come alive. Chapter 1. The New Rules of Negotiation. Imagine you're sitting across from a desperate man who has taken hostages and is holding them at gunpoint. The air is thick with tension, and one wrong word could send the situation spiraling out of control. You need to convince this man to release the hostages without violence. That's the scenario Chris Voss faced repeatedly in his career as an FBI hostage negotiator. His first rule of negotiation? Forget everything you think you know about being rational. Negotiation isn't about logic, it's about emotions. One of Voss's most gripping stories comes from a kidnapping case in Ecuador. An American had been taken hostage by a ruthless local group, and they were demanding a hefty ransom for his release. The FBI was brought in, and Voss found himself on a tense phone call with the captors. Time was running out, and tensions were high. In these kinds of negotiations, the key to success wasn't to remain calm and logical, but to get inside the kidnapper's head. Voss used a technique called tactical empathy. It wasn't about agreeing with the kidnappers or sympathizing with them, but making them feel understood. During the negotiation, Voss mirrored the kidnapper's words. When the kidnapper angrily shouted, "We need the money now or we'll kill him," Voss responded by repeating, "You need the money now?" This simple technique made the captor feel heard and encouraged him to keep talking. The more the kidnapper spoke, the more information Voss gathered about his state of mind. Voss didn't argue or try to reason with him. He didn't offer a counter-argument or solution right away. He just listened and reflected the captor's emotions back to him. Over time, the tension in the conversation began to ease. The kidnapper calmed down and eventually agreed to a lower ransom amount. The hostage was safely released. This isn't just a story about high-stakes hostage negotiations. The lesson here applies to everyday situations too. Whether you're in a business negotiation or an argument with your spouse, the first step isn't to come in with facts or logic, it's to make the other person feel heard. By using tactical empathy and mirroring, you can de-escalate almost any tense situation. In your daily life, imagine you're negotiating with your boss for a raise. Instead of saying, "I've worked hard, I deserve this raise," try using tactical empathy. Start with a question like, "How do you feel about the progress I've made over the past year?" Or, "What are your thoughts on my performance?" This opens the door to a conversation where your boss feels like their perspective is being valued. Then, mirror their responses. If your boss says, "I think you've done a good job but budgets are tight," you could say, "Budgets are tight?" This encourages them to keep talking, and it puts you in a position to understand their concerns better. Once you've fully understood their perspective, you'll be in a stronger position to negotiate what you want. Chapter 2. Be a mirror. Mirroring is one of the most deceptively simple negotiation tactics you can use. All it involves is repeating the last few words the other person said, or focusing on a key phrase in their sentence. At first glance, this might seem too basic or even manipulative, but when done correctly, mirroring can have a powerful psychological effect. It builds rapport, keeps the other person talking, and often leads them to reveal important information. Voss tells a riveting story about using mirroring in a hostage situation in the Philippines. The kidnappers were a notorious group known for their violent tactics. They had taken several hostages and were demanding an astronomical sum of money for their release. The situation was volatile, and the FBI's options were limited. When Voss got on the phone with the leader of the group, the conversation was tense. The leader was angry and kept raising his voice, making demands that seemed unreasonable. Instead of responding with his own arguments or offers, Voss began mirroring the leader's words. When the leader shouted, "We want $5 million or they all die," Voss calmly repeated, "$5 million?" This simple repetition made the leader pause. He had expected resistance or bargaining, but instead, he was met with a reflection of his own words. This disarmed him. He began to explain why he needed the money, and the more he talked, the more information he revealed. Voss kept mirroring, each time drawing the leader out further, learning more about his motivations and fears. At one point, the leader let slip that he didn't want to kill the hostages, but felt pressured by his men to act tough. This was the crack in the armor that Voss needed. By understanding the leader's internal conflict, Voss was able to steer the conversation in a way that eventually led to the safe release of the hostages. Mirroring isn't just for hostage situations, it works in everyday life too. Imagine you're negotiating with a car salesman. The salesman might say, "This car is priced at $25,000 because it's one of the best models on the market." Instead of arguing about the price or offering a lower number right away, try mirroring. Say, "One of the best models on the market?" This prompts the salesman to explain why he believes it's such a good deal. The more he talks, the more information you gather, which could eventually give you leverage to negotiate a lower price. Mirroring also works in personal relationships. If your partner says, "I feel like you're not listening to me," you can respond with, "You feel like I'm not listening?" This encourages them to open up more about their feelings, which can lead to a more productive conversation. When people feel heard, they're more likely to collaborate with you. Chapter 3: Labeling Emotions. Negotiation is not just about words and numbers, it's about emotions. People are driven by their feelings, even if they don't always realize it. That's why one of the most powerful tools in any negotiation is labeling emotions. Labeling is simply identifying and acknowledging the emotions the other person is feeling. It's not about agreeing or disagreeing with their feelings, it's about recognizing them and giving them a name. Voss shares a captivating story from a kidnapping case in Haiti. An American businessman had been kidnapped by a local gang, and his life was hanging in the balance. The gang leader, a man named Marcel, was furious during the negotiation. He felt disrespected and betrayed by the American government, and his anger was clouding his judgment. Voss knew that in order to defuse the situation, he had to address Marcel's emotions directly. Instead of ignoring Marcel's anger or trying to argue with him, Voss labeled it. He said, "It seems like you're really angry about how this has been handled." Marcel paused. For the first time, someone had acknowledged his emotions, and this gave him a sense of validation. "Damn right I'm angry," Marcel responded. Voss continued, "It sounds like you feel betrayed." This further opened the door, and Marcel began to explain why he felt so disrespected. He wasn't just after money, he wanted to be treated with dignity. By labeling his emotions, Voss was able to get Marcel to open up and eventually calm down. Labeling works because it takes the edge off negative emotions. When people feel like their emotions are recognized, they're less likely to act out. It's a way of showing empathy without agreeing with the person's perspective. In everyday life, you can use labeling in any tense situation. Let's say you're dealing with a frustrated customer. Instead of arguing or offering solutions right away, try saying, "It sounds like you're really frustrated with this situation." This simple acknowledgement can make the customer feel heard and understood, which often leads to a more productive conversation. Labeling also works in personal relationships. If your spouse is upset because you forgot an important event, you might say, "It seems like you're really hurt that I forgot." This doesn't excuse your mistake, but it shows that you're paying attention to their emotions, which can help diffuse the tension. Chapter 4: Get them to say no. Most people think the goal of negotiation is to get the other person to say yes, but Voss flips this idea on its head. He argues that you should actually aim to get the other person to say no. Why? Because when people say no, they feel safe and in control. It gives them a sense of autonomy, and once they feel secure, they're more open to negotiation. Voss shares a remarkable story about using this technique in a kidnapping case. A group of criminals had taken several hostages in a bank robbery gone wrong, and they were refusing to negotiate. They had barricaded themselves inside the bank, and the situation was becoming increasingly dangerous. Voss knew that pushing for a yes would only make the criminals dig in their heels, so he took a different approach. Instead of asking, "Will you release the hostages?" which would have put the criminals on the defensive, Voss asked, "Are you giving up on the idea of getting out of this alive?" This question, designed to elicit a no, made the criminals feel like they were in control. They didn't want to give up on surviving, so they responded with a firm no. This opened the door for further negotiation. By allowing the criminals to say no, Voss made them feel safe enough to engage in a conversation, which ultimately led to the peaceful release of the hostages. In your daily life, you can use this technique in a variety of situations. For example, if you're trying to close a deal with a client, instead of asking, "Do you think this proposal works for you?" which pressures them to say, "Yes," try asking, "Is this proposal completely off the table for you?" This gives them the opportunity to say no without feeling trapped, and it opens the door for further discussion. In personal relationships, you might ask your partner, "Are you giving up on us?" instead of, "Do you still love me?" The no response can feel more empowering to the other person and create space for a deeper conversation. Chapter 5. The power of "that's right." One of the most powerful moments in any negotiation is when the other person says, "That's right." This is a signal that they feel understood and are ready to move forward. But how do you get to this point? By summarizing their perspective in a way that resonates with them. In one of Voss's most intense stories, he was negotiating with a man who had taken his boss hostage in a fit of rage. The man was furious about how he had been treated at work, and he felt like no one had ever listened to him. Voss knew that in order to get the man to release the hostage, he had to make him feel understood. Instead of arguing or offering solutions, Voss listened carefully to the man's complaints. He then summarized the man's feelings in a way that captured his frustration. "It sounds like you've been working hard for years and feel like you've been treated unfairly. You've done everything they've asked, and they've never given you the respect you deserve." The man paused, then said, "That's right. This was the turning point in the negotiation." Once the man felt understood, he was willing to negotiate, and the hostage was eventually released unharmed. In your own life, getting to "that's right" can be a game changer. Whether you're negotiating with a client, a colleague, or a loved one, the key is to listen carefully to their concerns and summarize them in a way that shows you truly understand. When they say, "That's right," you know you've made a connection, and from there, you can move forward toward a solution. Chapter 6. Bending Reality. Negotiation is about more than just words. It's about bending the other person's perception of reality. People make decisions based on how they perceive risk, loss, and gain. If you can shift their perception, you can control the outcome of the negotiation. One of Voss's most memorable stories comes from a hostage situation in New York. A man had taken his girlfriend hostage after a domestic dispute. The man was emotionally unstable, and the situation was deteriorating fast. Voss knew that in order to save the girlfriend's life, he had to change the man's perception of the situation. Voss used a technique called anchoring. He planted the idea that the longer the man held his girlfriend hostage, the more dangerous the situation would become for him. He didn't outright threaten the man or make ultimatums, but he subtly suggested that time was running out. This shifted the man's perception of the situation. He began to realize that his options were narrowing, and he would have to act soon. Within a few hours, the man surrendered, and the girlfriend was released unharmed. In everyday negotiations, you can bend reality by framing the conversation in a way that highlights the risks of inaction. For example, if you're negotiating a deal with a client, you can anchor the conversation by saying, "If we move forward today, I can guarantee this price. But if we wait too long, the costs might go up due to market changes." This creates a sense of urgency without being overly pushy. In personal relationships, you might say, "If we keep arguing like this, it's only going to make things worse for both of us. Let's try to find a solution before things get out of hand." This shifts the other person's perception of the situation and encourages them to work toward a resolution. Conclusion. Negotiation is an art, and with the right tools, you can become a master at it. Chris Voss's experiences as an FBI hostage negotiator provide powerful insights into human behavior and psychology. Whether you're dealing with high-stakes business deals, personal relationships, or everyday conflicts, the techniques in this book can help you get what you want, while still making the other person feel understood and respected. The key takeaway? Never split the difference. Instead, aim for the best possible outcome by using empathy, mirroring, labeling emotions, and bending reality to your advantage. Negotiation isn't about winning or losing. It's about finding a solution that works for both parties, and with the right approach, you can achieve just that. Thank you for completing another BrevRead video. Like and subscribe to see more of our videos. If you have a particular book that you would like us to summarize, please share it in the comments section.